Put 2 fingers on your stomach right now. Push in just below your belly button. Did it bounce back hard, almost like pressing on a basketball? Or did your fingers sink in and stay there? If it pushed back, stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you is going to change how you think about that stubborn fat around your middle forever. It's not the fat you think it is, and nothing you've tried has worked on it, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you've been fighting the wrong enemy. I'm going to walk you through exactly what's happening inside that hard, stubborn belly, why it refuses to move, no matter how clean you eat or how hard you train, and then I'm going to give you the exact sequence, in the exact order, that finally shuts it down. Stick with me until the end, because the order you do these things, it matters more than the things themselves, and I'll show you why. Let's start with what most people get wrong. Most people think belly fat is belly fat. Calories in, calories out, burn it off, done. That works for regular fat. It does not work for this fat. This fat behaves less like stored energy and more like an organ. It has its own blood supply, its own hormone receptors, and, this is the part almost nobody knows, it can manufacture its own stress hormone from the inside, independent of what your brain and adrenal glands are doing. Here's how. Inside your body, cortisol exists in 2 forms. There's the active form, the one that's actually doing damage, spiking your blood sugar, breaking down muscle, keeping you wired at 2 a.m. And there's an inactive, dormant form called cortisone, just floating around your bloodstream, harmless waiting, the visceral fat around your organs, the deep fat, not the pinchable fat under your skin, is loaded with an enzyme that acts like a switch. Its entire job is to grab that sleeping, harmless cortisone and flip it into active, damaging cortisol, right there, locally, inside the fat cell itself. Your adrenal glands don't even need to be involved. Your stress levels could be at 0. You could be lying on a beach with a piña colada, and that fat is still quietly manufacturing cortisol 24 hours a day because it has its own private factory. And it gets worse, because that same fat tissue also grows extra docking stations for cortisol, more receptors than almost anywhere else in your body. So it's not just producing the stuff, it's actively pulling in more from your bloodstream and hoarding it. The more cortisol it makes and grabs, the more fat it stores. The more fat it stores, the bigger the factory gets. The bigger the factory gets, the more cortisol it makes. Round and round it goes. This is why the scale won't move even when you're doing everything right. This is why you can nail your steps, hit the gym 5 days a week, cut sugar, and that one stubborn ring around your middle just sits there like it's bolted on. You're trying to reason with a machine that doesn't care about your willpower. It runs on its own internal loop, and the damage doesn't stop at your waistline. That locally made cortisol floods back into your bloodstream and does 2 more things that explain almost everything else you've been feeling lately. First, it triggers the release of inflammatory signaling molecules, the same chemical messengers involved in joint pain, skin issues, and long-term cardiovascular strain. That low hum of inflammation you can't quite explain, the joints that ache a little more than they should for your age, that's not a coincidence. Second, and this one's sneaky, cortisol jams the docking mechanism that lets sugar move out of your bloodstream and into your muscle cells for fuel. It essentially locks the door, so your blood sugar sits elevated in your blood while the actual cells that need that sugar for energy are starving. That's why you can eat a full meal and still feel exhausted an hour later. That's the 3 p.m. wall. That's craving something sweet 20 minutes after lunch, even though you're not remotely hungry. Your body isn't asking for fuel. It's begging for a delivery system that's currently broken. Now here's the part that turns this from annoying into something you actually need to deal with. This cortisol doesn't stay contained to your belly and your bloodstream. It crosses straight into your brain, and it has a favorite target, a small seahorse-shaped structure called the hippocampus. Think of the hippocampus as the brake pedal for your entire stress response. Under normal conditions, when cortisol rises, the hippocampus senses it and fires a signal back down to your adrenal glands that essentially says, okay, that's enough, stand down. It's the thermostat that keeps the whole system in check. But the hippocampus has an unusual number of cortisol-sensing receptors, more than nearly any other brain region, which means it's also unusually exposed to cortisol damage. When cortisol stays elevated for months or years, which is exactly what's happening when a self-sustaining factory in your belly is producing it around the clock, The hippocampus takes the brunt of it. We can actually measure this. Brain imaging studies on people under chronic stress, people with cortisol-driven conditions, and people carrying significant visceral fat all show the same thing, a measurably smaller hippocampus. And when the brake pedal shrinks, it stops working properly. The signal that's supposed to tell your adrenal system to calm down gets weaker and weaker. So cortisol production doesn't slow down on its own anymore, no matter what's actually happening in your life. You could resolve every external stressor tomorrow, and the internal alarm would keep ringing anyway, because the part of your brain responsible for switching it off has been quietly worn down. And remember that same trick cortisol pulls with sugar and your muscles. It does the identical thing to your brain. Your brain is one of the most energy-hungry organs you have, and it runs almost entirely on glucose. And cortisol blocks that sugar transport system. It's blocking it in your brain, too. That's the fog. That's forgetting why you walked into a room. That's losing a word mid-sentence that you've said 1,000 times before. That's the sense that you used to be sharper, quicker, more on, and you can't quite pinpoint when that changed. So now you can see the full shape of the trap. The belly makes cortisol. The cortisol damages the brain's braking system. The damaged braking system lets cortisol run unchecked. The unchecked cortisol drives more fat storage in the belly. It's not 4 separate problems. It's one loop, feeding itself from 4 different directions. And that's exactly why partial fixes fail. You fix your sleep and wonder why the belly's still there. You fix your diet and wonder why the fog hasn't lifted. You're hitting one spoke of the wheel while the other 3 keep it spinning. So let's break it. Properly, this time, in the right order, hitting all 4 points instead of just one. The first move is the fastest one, and it's the one most people skip because it seems too simple to matter. You have to lower the total cortisol, flooding your system from the outside. So the belly isn't the only thing you're fighting. You're not adding fuel to an already lit fire. The single biggest lever here is your overnight eating window. Most people eat dinner at 8, snack at 9:30, and then wonder why they wake up puffy and exhausted. Every time you eat late, you're forcing your body to run digestion and blood sugar management during the exact hours it's supposed to be repairing itself and winding cortisol down. Close your kitchen 12 to 14 hours before you open it again. If you eat breakfast at 7 a.m., your last bite the night before should land around 5 to 7 p.m. That's it. No extreme fasting required. Just a clean, consistent overnight gap. Pair that with light in your eyes within the first hour of waking. Not through a window, not from your phone screen. Actual outdoor light for around 10 minutes. This single habit resets your circadian rhythm and pulls your natural cortisol spike back to where it's supposed to be. High in the morning to get you moving, low at night to let you sleep. Right now, for a lot of people, that curve is inverted. Wired at midnight, dragging at 7 a.m. This fixes that faster than almost anything else you can do. From there, 2 supports can accelerate this first phase. An adaptogenic herb that's been studied specifically for calming the stress hormone feedback loop can take real pressure off your system while your habits catch up. And a well-absorbed form of magnesium before bed matters more than people realize. Chronic cortisol exposure burns through your magnesium stores, and without enough of it, your nervous system physically cannot power down properly at night. No matter how tired you are, most people who commit to just this first lever notice a shift within about 2 weeks. Not weight loss yet, that comes later. But mornings feel less foggy. You wake up and actually feel awake instead of needing 45 minutes and 2 cups of coffee just to feel human. The second lever is where things start to visibly shift. And this is about breaking the partnership between cortisol and insulin. On their own, each of these hormones is manageable. Together at the same time, in your bloodstream, they are a fat storage signal your body cannot ignore, and they specifically target the deep visceral fat around your organs, the exact fat we've been talking about this whole time. The problem is snacking. Every time you eat between meals, even something healthy, like a handful of nuts or a protein bar, you spike insulin at a moment when cortisol is already naturally elevated from the stress of daily life. That combination, repeated 5 or 6 times a day, every single day, is basically a standing order to your body. Store more fat here. So the fix isn't a complicated diet overhaul. It's structural. 3 meals. No grazing in between. Finish breakfast, and don't put anything in your mouth except water until lunch. Finish lunch. Same rule until dinner. This matters more than what's actually on your plate. A slightly imperfect diet eaten in 3 clean windows will outperform a perfect diet nibbled on all day, every time, because the window is what determines whether insulin and cortisol ever get to team up. Within those 3 meals, aim for a solid hit of protein, somewhere in the range of 30 to 50 grams, because protein is what keeps your blood sugar level between meals and kills the craving that would otherwise send you reaching for something at 3 p.m. Add in real fats, olive oil, avocado, grass-fed butter. Add in color, vegetables, fruit, for the fiber and micronutrients that support the whole system. And get the ultra-processed stuff out as much as you realistically can, because those foods are engineered to spike insulin fast and hard, which is precisely what you're trying to avoid. Most people who lock in this second lever start noticing their waistband loosening somewhere around week 3 or 4. Not dramatic yet, but real. And it's the first physical proof that the loop is actually breaking. The third and final lever is the slow one, but it's the one that closes the loop for good, because it goes after the factory itself. As the visceral fat physically shrinks, the amount of tissue capable of manufacturing its own cortisol shrinks right along with it. Fewer fat cells, less enzyme, less local cortisol production, less fuel for the whole cycle. The main driver here is low-intensity movement, not high-intensity. This surprises people, because we've all been trained to believe harder is always better. But intense training spikes cortisol in the short term, and if your system is already cortisol-saturated, dumping more on top of it through brutal workouts can actually work against you. What you want instead is a daily 30 to 45-minute walk at a pace where you could still hold a conversation without gasping. This specifically targets visceral fat without adding to the stress load your body is already carrying. Alongside that, a clean, high-quality omega-3 source, a couple of grams a day, goes to work on the inflammatory signaling that's been running in the background this entire time, calming down the chemical messengers that cortisol has been pumping out. This is the layer that takes the longest, generally 8 to 12 weeks before you see real, measurable changes in waist circumference and markers of inflammation. And here's the encouraging part, the hippocampus. That brake pedal we talked about earlier is one of the most adaptable structures in the entire brain. It has genuine capacity to rebuild once cortisol exposure comes down and stays down consistently. Researchers have documented this kind of recovery in people coming out of chronic stress and even in more severe cortisol-driven conditions. Give it time, and the brake starts working again. Skip any one of these 3 levers, and the loop survives. Drop the input, but keep snacking. And insulin and cortisol keep pairing up in your bloodstream. Fix the eating window, but skip the walks, and the factory itself never shrinks. Do the walks, but stay up scrolling until 1 a.m., and you're refilling the tank as fast as you're draining it. All 3, together, in order, input down, insulin decoupled, fat physically reduced, and the entire structure comes apart from the inside. Now let me answer the questions I know are running through your head right now, because I get these constantly. How do I actually know this is what I'm dealing with, and not just regular fat? 3 signals to check. 1. Firmness. Regular fat under the skin squishes. This deep visceral fat feels tight, almost like there's pressure behind it, because there kind of is. 2. Distribution. It sits low and central, right around your middle, while your arms and legs stay comparatively lean. That's the classic pattern people describe as skinny everywhere except my stomach. 3. The company it keeps. If it's showing up alongside afternoon energy crashes, sugar cravings after full meals, and a mental fog that wasn't there a few years ago, that's not a coincidence. That's the loop announcing itself. 2 out of 3 of these, and you're very likely looking at exactly what we've been discussing. If you want it confirmed, 2 simple blood tests can tell you a lot. A marker of inflammation and a fasting insulin level. Ask your doctor about both. Do I really have to fast for 16 hours? I don't think I can do that. No, you don't. That 12 to 14 hour overnight window is not a hardcore fasting protocol. It's just closing the kitchen at a reasonable hour and not reopening it until morning. Dinner at 6, breakfast at 8, and you've already hit 14 hours without trying particularly hard. What actually sabotages people isn't the length of the window. It's the snacking that happens inside their eating hours. That's the piece that needs the discipline, not the fast itself. How long until I actually notice something? There are 3 timelines running here. because there are three separate systems recovering at three separate speeds. Energy and mental clarity tend to shift first, often within about 2 weeks, once that sugar transport door in your cells starts working again. The visible change around your middle typically follows in weeks 3 through 4, once the eating window becomes consistent rather than occasional, and the deeper markers, actual visceral fat reduction, inflammation coming down, waist measurement dropping, that's the 8 to 12 week mark, once all three levers have been running together for a while. If you're a month in and your energy has come back, but your waistline hasn't moved yet, that doesn't mean it isn't working. It means you're between stages, not that you've failed. Can the brain fog actually reverse, or is that permanent at this point? In most cases, yes, it can meaningfully improve, but it isn't automatic and it isn't instant. The hippocampus is remarkably capable of rebuilding itself once cortisol exposure comes down and stays down. And this is the part people don't want to hear. It requires consistency, not a good week here and there. A few solid days won't undo years of elevated cortisol. 6 months of steady effort across all three levers, on the other hand, can produce genuinely measurable improvements in mental clarity, waist circumference, and inflammation markers. Slow, but real. Here's what I want you to take away from all of this. That stubborn belly isn't a character flaw, and it isn't proof that you're not trying hard enough. It's a self-sustaining biological loop, and loops don't respond to willpower. They respond to being interrupted at the right points, in the right order. Drop the outside cortisol load first. Decouple insulin from cortisol second. Shrink the tissue that's manufacturing the problem third. Do all three, and you're not fighting your body anymore. You're finally working with it. So here's what I want you to do right now, before you close this out. Pick just one lever, the eating window, the morning light, or the daily walk, and commit to it starting tomorrow morning. Not all three at once, not a perfect overhaul overnight. Just one done consistently is worth more than 3 done half-heartedly for 4 days and abandoned. If this helped you understand what's actually going on in your body, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Because we're going to go deeper into each of these 3 levers individually. Drop a comment and tell me which lever you're starting with tomorrow. I read every single one, and it genuinely helps to say it out loud and commit to it publicly. And if you know someone who's been dealing with this exact thing, the stubborn belly, the afternoon crash, the fog that won't lift, and they haven't been able to figure out why, send this their way. Sometimes the most useful thing you can give someone isn't advice. It's just the explanation they've been missing. Talk soon.